pieces of information that I found was this book called Launch by John Spencer and AJ Giuliani. If you are not familiar, it is absolutely awesome, and if you take on Genius Hour in your classroom, I so recommend it. But one of the things that stood out to me was that our small geeky interests become our vital skills forever. And I started thinking about how I learn, because as a teacher, that's something I always like to go back to. And I know myself, if I'm putting my energy into something, it's because I'm interested in it, right? I'm sure if you were to take a minute and reflect on something in your life that you're interested in, that you put time into, maybe it's scrapbooking, maybe it's a hobby that you have. Personally, I'm a really big Harry Potter fan. So my family hosts like a Harry Potter movie marathon every year that we build, and it gets bigger and we create things to go along with it. And that small geeky interest is what drives me to learn things to go along with it. And I wanted that same experience for my students in the classroom in a way where we could meet research standards, but still be able to pull those in and create. So if you're not familiar with Genius Hour, we're going to play a little video for you now that just kind of gives you a quick little summary of what it is before we dive into how we did it.
Genius Hour begins with a simple premise. Give your students 20% of their class time to learn what they want. They choose the content while also mastering the skills and hitting the academic standards. With Genius Hour, students own the entire journey. They choose the topics based upon their own geeky interests. It doesn't have to be a traditionally academic area. They might like fashion or food or sports or Legos or Minecraft or deep sea creatures. Students ask the questions and engage in their own research to find the answers. Along the way, they design their own plan of instruction. They decide on the resources and activities, and each student sets goals and engages in self-assessment. They work at their own pace and set their own deadlines. Students decide on the grouping. Some work alone, others work in pairs or in small groups. In the end, students figure out what they will make and how they will share it with the world. A word of caution, it's not a total free-for-all. The best Genius Hour projects have systems and structures that empower students to reach their full potential. Even so, there will be mistakes, and you'll have to experiment. But in the end, students are empowered to be self-directed learners, engaging in creativity and critical thinking. In other words, they own the learning.
So, from that, the whole premise revolves around this idea of giving students 20% of their time to work on their passion project. And for me, that meant that I still needed to meet my ELA standards that obviously drive my curriculum, but I really wanted to promote those ideas of self-reflection, of growth. And I will tell you, and you'll probably see it as we go throughout the presentation, I am a very type A person, so I wanted it to not be a free-for-all, kind of like they said in the video. So Google allowed me to put a lot of those structures in place that we'll get to in a moment.
So 3M was one of the first companies to do some sort of a passion project. All the way back in 1948, they let their employees take 15% of their time to come up with something that would help. And the passion project at 3M, does anyone know what 3M came up with? Sticky notes. The sticky notes, that's right.
Post-it notes.
That's right, the Post-it notes.
And you guys are good. The 7th graders, it takes them a few minutes to get there.
These guys are much more advanced.
True.
You know, does anybody know one product that came from Google's 20%? Google Maps is a good one, but that is not the answer. What's that?
Google Expeditions.
That might have come later. It may have come later. Their original one, I guess we need to change that to be the original one. Thank you very much. The original one was actually Gmail. That was the first thing to come from the passion projects. And so when we look at what our students may be able to do, we're really just trying to build confidence and getting them to think about what's something that really speaks to them.
So So for me, in my language arts classroom, the way I decided to structure our 20% time or Genius Hour, because obviously I don't have as much resources or funding or time as Google, right? But I wanted to give them this opportunity to pursue their passions. So I dedicated every Friday to 20% time. Launched the second week of school, and it spans until May. So students have pretty much from September to May to work on their passion projects every Friday. And we do a lot with bringing in the students' interests, and along the way meeting the ELA standards of speaking, listening, reading nonfiction, researching, writing, because we do writing reflections along the way, so kind of encompassing everything into this process. So kind of the general structure of how I use Google Docs to structure this is in marking period 1, it's very research heavy, and I'll kind of walk you through a little bit of what that looks like. Students start to develop a project plan in Google Docs, and it's kind of our building of their passions, discovering their interests, discovering what they want to pursue and create. They actually then will close out the second marking period with a pitch presentation that we'll kind of talk you through. And in that, Google plays a role in our discussion posts, in our share out presentations, and in our goal setting sheets. And I try to keep it to one big assessment per marking period to go along with Genius Hour. So kind of a more organized breakdown of this. In September, we spend a lot of time immersing into passions, and I'm going to walk you through what that looks like and how the students do it. The focus on that point is not necessarily on the project, but more so on the topic. So some students come in raring and ready to go and know exactly what they want to create. But in September, I don't even necessarily completely want them there, because after research is where a lot of their greatest ideas come in. We spend October and November really immersing into the research process, how to do it, what it looks like, how to take notes off of a source. Because I teach 7th grade, we also do a lot with how to find a credible source, which, you know, is a very big topic. And then in November and December, we put together a parts plan, which is modified from that launch book by AJ Giuliani, where the students break down kind of what their project is actually going to be and make some decisions. They create a pitch presentation, which is a 90-second pitch that they present to a board of directors, which is their classmates and some other pretty important people from the district who come and check out their projects. And then we take a little hiatus, pretty much from the month of December and over the holiday break. We use that as processing time, which I'll talk to you when we get to that, but it is interesting how much they really do process and self-reflect without me even prompting them to, because of the investment level they have in it at that point. January and February is where we reevaluate our plan, we start to add more research, and we start to really set goals. So a lot more of that self-reflective learning comes into play at this point in time. Right now, in February, March, and April, we are in the throes of project building. So the students set a project plan that I'll walk you through, where they decide how they're going to use their work days, and I let them know what mini lessons they'll have along the way, but they really decide where they're going at that point in time. And then April and May, we spend kind of preparing for the final presentation, where students take all of their work throughout the year, they take their project that they've created, and they once again present it to the same board of people that they were there for them in their pitch presentations earlier in the year. So to start, we immerse into our passions, because it can be hard to decide on one particular topic. Often students come in and they have a wide range of things that they're interested in. So we start with what I call the questions to get started document. And if you actually click on the picture, it should take you to a forced copy of this document, which will save it into your records. You'll notice that throughout today's presentation, all the documents that I share with you will take you into a copy of it for yourself if you would like it. But basically, this document asks students to really think about what they're interested in. So it asks them to list, for instance, 5 things they wish they could do but physically or mentally cannot. It asks them if they weren't in school, what would they be doing? And at this point, I do get some silly answers. For instance, I can tell you in that list 5 things you wish you could do physically but cannot, I have at least 5 students a year who write the word fly, right? And I will tell you, I've taught this to teachers, and I always have at least 3 that write the word fly, because we all wish we could do it. But that's not necessarily going to lead to a tangible project, right? But the goal is to get all of those ideas out there and get even those big dream, wish I could fly without being on an airplane just by myself on the paper, because it's from those big ideas that we end up narrowing down to more tangible, concrete, doable projects. So at this point, there's no holds bar. I don't pass any judgment on the things that they choose to put on the paper. And it really gives them a chance to put in what they're interested in. It gives them also the chance to get to know each other, because this is September, so we build a lot of classroom community this way, sharing out what we're interested in, talking about our interests. Oh, you play soccer, I didn't know you play soccer. And it also gives me the chance to get to know the students, which is really nice. From our questions to get started, we create a mind map. So the student puts their name at the center of it and then branches out all of their interests. Inevitably, I get the question during this process of, I want to put this on my mind map and it wasn't on my questions to get started. Can I still do that? And the answer is always absolutely. Now, in terms of the Google tie-in to this, I do actually use the website MindMap to create the mind map itself, because it's a little more tangible. And then what I have the students do is they snip a picture of that and they put it into a document on Google Docs. I do this for a couple of reasons. One, I want to be able to get back to it easily. And for me, if I've got my folder of their things from Genius Hour with all of their Google Docs from throughout, I can easily go back. That comes in super handy when somebody comes to me in December and says, Miss Bailey, I really want to change my topic. I'm really not liking it anymore. And we can go back to these early assignments and say, okay, well, what else was on your map? What else could we work with? But this also gives students the chance to get all of their interests down in one place and start to kind of make sense of it. From there, we dive into a passion bracket using Flippity, which Mary Beth is going to talk to you a little bit about.
Coming this way. So they had all of their ideas on their map, and I don't know if anybody is familiar with the Final Four and the NCAAs and all your brackets. This is the same thing where they can put their passions on it, and it actually goes through. We use a site called Flippity. I don't know how many of you have used this site before. It is absolutely awesome. The bracket is the very second to last thing, but there are quizzes in here, name pickers, digital breakouts, all different sorts of things. So that is one to actually put in your back pocket to use later. But we do have students use the Flippity, and again, you can click on the picture of it and get a copy of it to see exactly what it does look like for our students. But as I said, they'll start with 2 ideas, and they'll put their ideas on the outside and then decide what bumps up or what wins the game. And then when they come in the middle, that is what they're saying is their ultimate passion for their project. And again, they'll snip this, take a picture of it, and they'll put it in a Google Doc. And we use Schoology, so some of that is put in through Schoology Google assignment.
Just the one thing I will say, if you use Schoology's, I don't know how many people have Schoology, but if you do use Schoology and you use the Google assignment through it, you want to make sure they go through the Flippity site as opposed to creating it as a Google assignment, because Flippity is done through Google Sheets, which is awesome, but going through the Google assignment slows it down a little bit and makes it a little funky to turn it into the bracket. So that was just a little tip that I learned along the way. Too much? Okay. So at this point, students narrow down to their one topic. So whatever wins that passion bracket when they go through that process, now is the topic that they're going to start to look into. And that's when we start to talk a lot about sources, credibility, background research, and the importance of having background on your topic. We also talk a lot about how even if you think you know everything about something, there's still more that you can learn, and you can still find credible sources that are going to back up what you already know about your topic. At this point, I do start to get students who are starting to think about their project. So what students do is they might keep a running list on their Padlet or in a document to keep track of ideas that they have, but I try to gear them away from choosing one specific project per se at this point. At this point, it's really a goal, the real goal is to research. To do that, what we actually do is we use Padlet. So the students create thick and thin questions in a Google Doc, and then in that Google Doc, they post their link to their Padlet where they organize their research. So the great thing about Padlet for research is it gives the students an opportunity to organize their research in a way that makes sense for them. So we talk about setting up shelves on Padlet, and you'll notice there's 2 different students here who approached it in 2 different ways. One student decided to break it down in terms of background research, thick and thin questions, so they're thin questions, they're thick questions, and then keeping Padlet posts underneath that, and that's what worked for him, and he's still rolling with that process now in February and has it organized and great. The other student decided to break it up more by source, so that's what made more sense to him, and then he kind of organized and ended up labeling some things along the way, but it was a great way to keep track of things. For me, the organization piece comes in through Google Docs, because for me it always has to come back to it not being a free-for-all, because as it is, I might have 30 students in my class working on 30 different projects, and I have to keep track of all that, and that's only for one class period throughout the day. So the Google Doc posting allows them to be able to easily go in and get to their Padlet link without having that sort of overwhelming sharing of a Padlet. So it just keeps that a little more organized for me. But the other thing that we do as well is with databases, we used a research document to lay things out a little bit more for them, because as 7th graders, they struggle a little bit with accessing, using, and researching from the databases. So this was a little bit more of a concrete way for them to take some notes off of that and be able to organize their information in their research stage. Once the students have collected their research, that's when we start to really talk about their project plan. And once again, if you click on the picture, it should take you to the parts plan document for you to be able to make a copy of for your records if you're interested. This is where students are now starting to decide what they're actually going to create. So they've done the background research, they've looked into their topic, and now they have to decide what their project is going to be, who will be the audience for their project, and we spend a lesson talking about how you determine your audience and the importance of knowing that. We also talk about what role they'll play in their creation. I have had students who have chosen to partner up, so it's particularly important to kind of address that role if there is going to be a partnership. Then they start to think about what tasks they'll actually need to do to create the project. So what would be their first step, second step, third step, etc. And at this point, it does end up looking a little abstract and changes as we go throughout the process, but that's okay. I just want them thinking at this point, is this a realistic thing for me to create? Am I going to be able to do this? Is this something that I want to pursue? And then finally, a solution. So we talk a lot about how if you're going to create something, it should be solving something throughout the world or contributing to the world in some way, shape, or form. So we spend some time talking about why the world might need their projects. To give you an idea, here's an example of one of the parts projects from a student from this year. So this student actually has a lot of allergies, and on his passion bracket, he really decided he wanted to look more into how to improve the world for people who have allergies. So what he's wanting to create is essentially an EpiPen that is smaller than the ones that are already out there, because he feels the one that he has to carry around on a daily basis is really cumbersome. So his audience is anyone with severe allergies. He says that it would help to have a 3D printed for prototypes, and he's thinking about how he's going to put that together. And his tasks right now are that he needs to find out how EpiPens work and then make it smaller but just as effective. So notice that that's kind of still dreaming big in terms of his tasks, right? Because, you know, creating a full EpiPen by the end of the year might be a little challenging. But when we get to a later part of the project, that's where he kind of starts to say, okay, I think maybe I want to make a prototype. And I think maybe I would need to look into these materials. And I think I would need to maybe present how I would do this if I were to create it. So he'll get there. And then the solution is that this would help people to be able to carry an auto-ejector that isn't as big. And he also was very concerned about the cost of EpiPens, given that he has allergies. He experiences that on a regular basis, right? Or at least his parents do. So he wanted to find a way to make his product smaller, but also more cost-effective to be able to bring that cost down. So, another example, kind of on a complete flip side, is I had a student who wanted to look into creating a website for how to be a vegan. And this one was kind of intriguing because I kind of said to him, well, where are you going with this? Are you thinking recipes? What are you thinking you're going to do with this? And at the time, he was pretty unsure. So if you look at his task, for instance, he says, I will need to research the downsides of the 2 diets, and then I will put the information on a website and publish it so everyone who wants to see the information can. There will also be a list of ways to stay healthy without having to give up animal byproducts. So at this point, his project seemed like it was getting there, but not quite. And this is where Google Docs came in really handy for me. So these parts plans are done through Google Docs. I'm able to go through, preview them before I sit down for a conference with the student, and then put my comments in the sidebar in real time so that the student can go back to access it, but so can I. So in his parts plan, there are about 10 different comments of him and I putting different things into this to ultimately get us to the point of landing on a slightly different project. So this student is actually not a vegan and was interested in the vegan lifestyle and has decided that his project now is going to be taking on that lifestyle for a 30-day time period and documenting how he feels, how his body changes. He's an athlete, if he notices a difference in his hockey ability in the course of those 30 days. So he's almost doing like a case study research on himself as he's going through this process, and he's going to put it all together into a blog. But it's through that commenting, conferencing process that him and I kind of got to that point of redeveloping that project a little bit. So, and I tell you this to show you that this is a process and that that's okay.
So when it comes to November, December, Kara puts together a team of administrators, and it's usually a principal or assistant principal from her school. I come in from central office. Usually also the tech director will come in, the assistant superintendent will come in. I think we've had the superintendent at times also. Just many different faces for the students. And we have a rubric, and the students know the rubric ahead of time. And they talk for a short time, 90 seconds, telling us about their project, why it's a good project, how it will help the world. This is a sample of just a snippet of one of our children, one of our students talking.
Because people really need your help, and even though there are amazing teams that go out there and help our people, the funds for help can go limited. So we need your attention and appreciate.
So not only are we having the rubrics and evaluating these presentations, the students are doing the same thing, and they're going over the rubric and giving their feedback at the same time. And what that does is Carol will put those all together, and the librarian, and that's, she spoke briefly before to you about conferencing with the students. So this is another tool that is used for the conferencing.
And if you're interested in more of the pitch presentation requirements, if you click that document picture in the slideshow, it'll take you to the document for the pitch presentation requirements and what they actually put together. So from there, the rubrics that everyone fills out go on to our first piece of real self-reflection throughout this process. So like I said, after the pitch presentation, we take a little bit of a break. So we normally do pitch presentations, depending on how the calendar falls, last week of November, first week of December. We take the whole month of December off from Genius Hour, and we come back after the new year, and we typically launch back in our first couple of days back with Genius Hour. At that point, the students receive their feedback, and they start to go through and they tally up how they did on the rubric. They also write down any of the information, any of the feedback that was given to them from the board of directors, so from the administrators or from their peers as they observe their presentations. So they might have gotten feedback like, your fit question didn't seem like it's really going to guide research, or didn't seem like a very strong fit question, how could you revise it? Or I'm a little concerned of how you're going to actually make this product, things like that. The students start to look through that feedback and ultimately set 3 goals for themselves for the 3rd marking period. They set a research goal, so what is something else that they need to research? What feedback do they get? Where were they lacking in research, or what do they need to still learn in order to create this project? Then they set a project goal, and that might be something from their feedback, or it might be something that they have been thinking about. I have a lot of students who will come back after the holiday break and say, you know, I'm so excited about creating my shoe cover because I had some students last year who created shoe covers to go over their sneakers to protect them in the event of rain or snow.
That was a very big thing last year.
It was.
Shoe covers.
I had a lot of sneaker fans last year, so that was a big deal. And they would say, you know, I tried it over break and this didn't work, but this did. So their project goal might be based on some experimentation that they did over break, hopefully with parent approval. And then they set another goal. And the reason I keep that one pretty open-ended is because I find it varies project to project, because each one is so uniquely different. So I want them all to have a research and a project goal, but the other goal gives them that leeway of maybe they need a second project goal or a second research goal. Or I've had a couple of students really reflect on themselves as learners in that space, which has been interesting, where they've said, you know, I tend to sit with my buddy during Genius Hour, and I know I don't get as much done as I need to, so I need to pick a different seat in the classroom during those days and really focus and get to work. So there's merit in every single one of those. And again, done through Google Docs, and gives the opportunity for me to conference with students and to guide them a little bit with those goals. Because setting goals is hard for 7th graders, setting goals is hard for an adult sometimes too. So sometimes those goals have to go through a round or two before we get to a place where they're really going to hit them. From there, students start to build their project plans. My students did this recently, and I'll kind of show you some examples of some of them. The great thing about this is it starts to put the ownership on them of how they're going to move forward. And what I find is also really interesting about this is most of the students realize after we go through the goal setting that they need to have more research before they can go on and create. So some of them will be a little gung ho and go right to the creating piece. But I would say 9 out of 10 of them stop and say, whoa, I need more research. I need to learn a little bit more here before I actually get to the point where I'm creating a project. So most of them spend those next couple of class periods really diving back into that. So with the action plan, which if you click on that one, it'll take you to the copy. But with the action plan, to give you some examples of what it would look like. This particular student is choosing to write a novel as her Genius Hour project. And she spent the first marking period really researching how someone writes a novel, how do you get published, how do you find a literary agent, etc. But what she found was she wanted to write a book that would interest her classmates. So she had about 5 different ideas for her book, and she decided to start with a Google survey to determine which one of those ideas should be the one that she would go with. So for her, she chose to spend her first Genius Hour work time setting up her survey and asking her classmates for feedback. Then she started to lay out what she was going to do each Genius Hour in terms of what she wanted to hit for progress points. So she set some ambitious goals here. She wrote that she's going to get done at least 15 pages of my book and research what the characters should be like and what people find interesting. 15 pages is equal to around 35 pages in a real book is what she had found in her research of, you know, Google Doc page to printed book page. And one of the comments that I made to her was, I feel like maybe you're taking on a lot for a 45-minute class period. But what was interesting was she ended up finding that on her own as well, that she needed to go in and change her document. So the great thing again about this being through Google Docs is that she can go in and make adjustments to her plan and continue to tweak as she goes.
So the final presentations, wow, they are so different than the presentations that we see in November and December, where they're fumbling in it. In some cases, for the 7th graders, it's the first time that they've actually fiddled with a computer and talked in front of a group of people. And by the time we come to the finals, it's just, it is amazing at how the students have come through this process. Again, out their presentations, they all use Google Slides and they share it with everyone. And we have a very specific list of what is supposed to be in it. And they do need to share with us their challenges. Not only their successes, but we want to hear their challenges. And as well as challenges is, what are you proud of? And we just had, Kara's going to take you through a couple and talk to you about a couple of the presentations that were just phenomenal.
So some of the ones from last year, we had a student who was particularly interested in robotics, and he created a prototype of a mosquito reduction device that would go into water and vibrate in order to repel mosquitoes in any sort of standing body of water, particularly he was concerned about Florida, to be able to repel mosquitoes and reduce illnesses that are carried by mosquitoes. So he actually sought out some experts beyond just research. So he met up with a local robotics instructor and was able to talk to him about the process, which was great. The how did music change over time? This student put together an interactive timeline using Flippity of all of the things she learned about music and how different music has shifted over time. She used video, she used reviews from other people, she made her own conclusions, and did a very detailed timeline of her thoughts of music evolving. The student in the bottom left corner, this student actually started the year wanting to write a song. And she really wanted to learn how to play guitar and write her first piece. And she ended up finding partway through the year that that just really wasn't what she actually enjoyed. She thought it sounded great, she thought she was interested, and then it got to be December and she was like, wow, you know what? I'm not looking forward to sitting down and learning to play guitar. This is not something I'm interested in. So she came to me and asked to change her topic. And I said to her, okay, well, we're at a point in the year where you can still choose to do that, but I would need not a full pitch presentation, but a layout plan of what you would want to create. And she said, well, I really want to create a dog walking business. I live in a big neighborhood. There's a lot of dogs. I feel like it's an opportunity for me to kind of have make some money and have a great business going, and I think people need this. And I said, okay, lay out your project plan and let's see where we can go. So she actually ended up designing flyers, designing business cards, and launching a dog walking business that she is still using today, because I teach them in 8th grade English and she has me grade 3 this year. So she is still running her dog walking business, made a tremendous amount of money over the summer being able to do this, and she promoted herself using the things she created. Another student really wanted to look into mindfulness, and in that ended up finding a lot of information about yoga, which she had never done before. And she essentially taught herself a lot about yoga through this process. She ended up taking a yoga class in her own time, but then her goal was mindfulness in the classroom. So she designed a yoga charades game that could be played in the classroom to help teach students different yoga poses and the impact that they would have on being able to calm your mind. So it was pretty incredible the progress she made as well. Now, one that's not pictured up here, but that was also particularly impressive in the end, was a student who wanted to design a video game system. And specifically, he wanted to design a video game system that could come out of a seat in an airplane, so that if you were traveling, you wouldn't have to take, say, your Xbox with you, but a machine would pop out with different devices, and you could do Xbox or PlayStation or Switch or whatever, and it would all be right there for you in the seat. So he got a little frustrated through this process because that was a pretty big endeavor to take on. And in probably probably partway through October and November, had a complete breakdown during Genius Hour, complete nerves, high anxiety kid. How am I going to do this? What am I going to do? And pretty much sat there and said, I don't know that I'm cut out for Genius Hour. He was a kid who was very used to being able to do well on tests and quizzes, but not having to think for himself as much in certain situations. So he persevered through it. We worked him through it with conferences. He tweaked his design a little bit and ultimately ended up designing a video game system. But instead of being one that would pop out of an airplane, he designed a prototype for one that could be solar powered. So he looked into solar power energy and how that could potentially work for a video game system. His final presentation was amusing in the sense that his why for doing this, because he asked them to identify their why, was that his mom is always telling him to go outside and play, and this way he can be outside, but have his video games with him. So he had a pretty solid why, and he ultimately, in his presentation, the amount of self-reflection, he didn't, completely say, I had a breakdown in November, and et cetera, but he definitely said, I had challenges, and this is what I thought I could do, but I ended up changing it, and now I'm really happy with my product. And it was really cool to see that even though his might not have been the best presentation up there or the most beautifully designed product, his amount of ownership of that process and his amount of understanding of his growth and learning during it was just unbelievable. Which brings us to our outcomes that we see as a result of this project. I've seen such an increased student sense of ownership and learning. The fact that they go home over holiday break and try out using hair dryers and plastic covers, how to put a shoe cover on the shoes, again, hopefully with parental permission, and come back in January talking to me about how it went is amazing. This year I have students who are doing things like, I have one who's creating a cookbook, so she's trying out different recipes, and in her own time she's been starting to kind of look into doing that at home. Student who's writing a novel is, anytime she finishes work in any class, is raising her hand and going, can I work on my novel from Mrs. Bailey's class? And pulling that out and trying to fit in those spare moments to do so. It's been incredible to see their ownership over this process. And also to see their struggles and how they adapt as well. For instance, I have a student this year who is a field hockey player and started off really wanting to put microphones into helmets to be able to communicate better with different players. But then she started looking into regulations and was worried that it wouldn't pan out. So she's now in the process of tweaking her project a little bit to look a little bit different. And I'm interested to see where she goes. It builds students' knowledge of research. I have the benefit of being a 7th and 8th grade teacher, and seeing how the students who had me for 7th grade know how to approach research is incredible. That they know so much more and are able to engage, which is awesome. And they also develop a sense of identity as a learner, to be able to set goals, to reflect, to be able to take on that ownership. And for me as a teacher, it's incredible because I've learned so much from them. For instance, my buddy up here who built the mosquito reduction device, I used to joke that anytime I would sit down in a conference with him, that I felt like I learned something, as I know absolutely positively nothing about robotics. And I feel like he taught me over the course of the year, which is pretty cool. But it also just helps me to get to know my students on a different level, because I see them persevering, I see them trying, but I also really get to see their interests and what they're able to accomplish, which is just incredible and wonderful. It's changed my classroom, which is awesome.
And all of this just comes together with our Google Docs and how we're so easily able to share and, like Kara said, have real-time feedback with our students.
Yeah.
So does anyone have any questions for us? You do have all the templates within the presentation.
Well, I'm just curious about your class sizes. So how many students are working on a passion project for you at any one given time?
So they range from 25 to 30.
Okay. And do you do it with 7th and 8th grade, or just 7th?
Only with 7th grade, because my 8th grade PLC team, we kind of work together, and they're getting there. We're trying some little things this year that are building us towards Genius Hour.
But she'll get them there. I have faith in that.
This is great. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Is this an individual project, or do you ever allow students to work with a partner?
So they may work with a partner if they choose to. They just have to pitch to me what their benefit is from working together. So they have to kind of defend that decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
What is the time URL again?
Oh, yes.
Oh, we can put that back up.
Sorry, guys.
I hope no one gets dizzy.
Sorry. We're almost there. There we go.
There you go. And this is linked on the conference site also. And in the presentation you have our email, so please feel free to reach out with any questions. And we hope you enjoy the conference.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much for coming. I appreciate it. Nice to meet you. So we don't have Google Classroom in schools, but if it has Google Classroom, that is good too. Yes. And schools does the same thing with Google Apps, where it just makes the class for them.
Correct, because it's all in the same folder.
And they have certain deadlines, but I try to be flexible to finish their projects. If they're genuinely working, then I'm like, okay, we can extend that a little bit and make that a little longer. So. days in a cycle kind of thing, like a period, that would be
So
a
it
big
could
deal.
be any subject area.
But I know a lot of my colleagues are starting to try out modified versions of their classroom as well for different subjects. And it's been cool to see what they've taken on. So like, I don't know if you're familiar with National History Day, but our social studies department kind of took this idea and we went their project for National History Day for this year rather. And we were constructed around James Howard, the people they were structured and we would dive into it. Construction is a little bit too.
For eighth grade.
I saw what I was doing there. We're on this. So there's another thing in there.
There shouldn't be.
So I tweaked out the notes, I tweaked it down, and I modify a requirement depending on the state. Yeah, but the next thing is because it's so personalized, I can do that without it being, nobody notices. Absolutely. What do you teach? Oh, nice. Awesome.
And
Absolutely.
right, exactly,
Absolutely.
just like you said,
Well, that's
any
right.
subject area,
It could be
exactly.
anything science related, you know, that fits your curriculum. Exactly. We had a foreign language teacher who took my session over the summer on this and modified it to be about her language. So they could pick anything, culture. She gave them like a list of 400 things that line up with the AT standards for foreign language. They could pick any of those and turn it into a project. So, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for coming. Yeah.
I was lucky enough this year that I teach high school computers.
Oh, nice.
That's a bunch of good stuff, and my classes never fill because some kids will take graphic design, some kids will take programming. So I got like 3 in this class, 5 in this class. So I went to my principal and I said, I run a whole class as a genius hour.
That's awesome.
So I had an entire class.
That's all doing projects.
All doing their own private projects.
That is so cool.
Yeah, they actually had them do 2 over the course of 9 weeks because I didn't want them getting 2 over the course of the 18 weeks.
Okay.
So I used Google Sites.
Okay, to keep it.
And they had to post all their progress. So they had to show me like weekly progress reports and things like that. Because I was sort of trying to figure out like how do I grade this? Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
Where do you teach?
In Girard, here in PA.
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so it was really fortunate. I had, so that's why I was really curious to see yours, like what you, more like your supplements that you use to keep them on track and things like that, just because, and like how you got them thinking about their projects and things like that. Yeah, but the sites worked out really well. So I just had them post their weekly progress reports, and then the kids, and then I used Schoology, so the kids would post their projects, say, on Schoology, and then the kids had to go and look at their progress and like reflect on it, so they could see what they were doing. And that was really nice because it springboarded them for other interests. So like first 9 weeks they did one thing, but then the second 9 weeks I was like, I want to try what that kid's doing.
I see.
So I had a couple of kids who did like video game design, animation, and some of them made music with GarageBand.
Cool.
Yeah, so it was pretty cool.
That's
We have some
awesome.
really good resources there that I may
Yes. Yours sounds awesome.
scoop up. Yeah, it was fun. I mean, it was probably the most meaningful 18 weeks I ever had because
Right.
every kid wanted to be there and they were excited about what they wanted to do.
And that makes a huge difference.
Yes, it does. And they said, we love coming to this class because we get to work on what we want to work on and, you know, they enjoy it.
And learn what they want to learn.
I know. It was amazing. It was just an amazing.
It just changes. Honestly, I felt like starting it too rejuvenated me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just seeing their others, their excitement. Like, I fed off that, you know?
And knowing that they can come and focus on what they want to.
Yes.
You know.
Exactly.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You were awesome. I just smiled. You did awesome too.
See, we're gonna definitely need those tomorrow.
How'd the session go?
Hello,
Really
good,
well.
thanks.
Good.
Yeah. You ready for yours now? You moving in?
Yep.
Nice. Come on in. Put it now. Good
Is
luck.
that projected for the room or is that for us?
Oh, that's for the room.
Oh, perfect. So we don't even need this.
Nope,
No,
you
you're
don't.
good.
You can hook right in and you can get the audio out of the speakers. I mean,
Yeah.
out of the big.
Great.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Thank you very much.
And good luck.